Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be testing and benchmarking the budget PC that we just wrapped up building. We're going to run through a couple artificial benchmarks to get a feel for how the system works, if it's stable, what kind of temperatures we're going to be seeing, and then we're going to move on to a few games. So let's get into it. So to test out this build, I like to run it through a few things to test temperatures as well as stability. And when it comes to CPU and CPU cooling, I like to run Cinebench and a multi-core test. And I like to see how it performs. We can compare scores here with expected scores, and we can also check our temperatures and make sure that we're not maxing out our CPU temperature-wise, and we're keeping everything within normal limits. So I'm gonna go ahead and start a CPU multi-core, and we're just gonna keep an eye on the temperature here, and we're gonna make sure that the system doesn't crash. So we can hear our fans ramping up in the computer. We're seeing our package temperatures increase here, and you can see the cores down here working at roughly 4.9 megahertz. We haven't changed any of the clocks in the BIOS. This is stock factory settings, so I just want to make sure everything's running good at stock factory settings. We'll let this run for the full 10 minutes, and we can see the CPU's running at 59 Celsius on the package. All the cores here look great. There's no crazy variance between temperatures, so we're looking good on temperatures right now. I'm just gonna monitor this and make sure everything goes well. Now, if you didn't watch the video on what components are in this, this is an AMD Ryzen 5 7600. The CPU cooler is a Peerless Assassin dual 120 fan CPU cooler, and we're running Asgard Valkyrie DDR5 RAM. It's currently at 4800 megahertz, and we have an ARC A380 GPU. While the CPU cooler may be a little bit overkill for the 7600, we are running stock settings, and there is a little bit of room for overclock, and this CPU cooler is keeping this CPU at a very cool temperature, which I like to see. I don't believe that there's going to be any chance of this overheating. We've been going almost 3 minutes here, and we haven't even breached we barely breached 60 Celsius. So we have about 35 Celsius to go before things get really hot. So there's a lot of headroom with this, and it was only, I believe, $35 for the CPU cooler. So an excellent CPU cooler in my opinion. It was reviewed very well on Gamers Nexus. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. And this is doing excellent. We can see that the CPU utilization is at 100% utilization. We have 4.9 gigahertz speed of a base speed of 3.8. So we're currently holding a very high boost clock. Now this CPU is capable of boosting from factory to 5.1, but it's factory settings on the motherboard. We'd have to go in and enable a few things to get it to run to that 5.1, but this is working excellently. I don't think the temperatures would jump much higher than maybe 70, 75 Celsius running at a stable 5.1. So this CPU and cooler combo is perfect. I'm super happy with the temperatures. And if you watched the build video, you may have thought, oh, we only have one case fan in the Lian Li A3 case. Well, this is the reason. I was not too worried about getting case flow with that big of a CPU cooler, so it allows some noise cut down on case fans and keeps things much quieter, as this build is not supposed to be a super performance build. It's a budget build that you can game on, but is also just designed for a lot of productivity work with the side of gaming. So here we're coming up on the end of the test. We're gonna see what score it pulls, and we can see a max of 62 Celsius over here. So temperatures are great. It's stable throughout this test. No crashes occurred, and we're just gonna make sure that it's finishing up rendering. We're gonna make sure that the score looks to be around what it should be. So here we can see 789 points, now a 7600 running at a steady 5.1 gigahertz, gets around 840. So this looks to be right in the ballpark at 4.9 gigahertz steady. So everything is looking excellent here, super stable. Temperatures only reached 62 Celsius on the package. All the cores were a little bit cooler. So things are doing really, really well in terms of CPU stability and CPU temperatures. So now we can move on to GPU. So here we're going to be using Heaven DirectX 11 benchmark. We have a setting of high quality tessellation to normal, anti-aliasing at X8. We have a system resolution of 1920 by 1080. We're going to be running in non-full screen, and we're going to go ahead and launch this. We'll monitor everything up here and make sure things look good. So I was expecting similar performance to this in terms of around 30 to 40 frames per second. The GPU is running at 60 Celsius, 99% utilization. CPU is at 38 Celsius at 4% to 8% utilization. So what we can gather from this is that in this particular system, this GPU is the bottleneck. The CPU is sitting idle most of the time waiting for the GPU to send information. So if we upgraded the GPU a little bit, we would see higher CPU utilization, but since this is a budget build, we had to save money in some place, and that was going to be the GPU. But we're not doing terrible. We're at 1080p, seeing 30 frames per second to 40 frames per second inside of Heaven on high quality. To me, that is a win-win across the board. That's excellent. I'm going to wait and let this run so I can see heat saturation in the GPU, make sure that things don't get out of control, and that everything works as expected, and that we don't see any instability or any crashing or anything like that. The Heaven has been running for almost 30 minutes now, and that is going to put us at 64 Celsius, and everything is running perfectly. There's been no crashes, the temperatures haven't spiked, so in my opinion, this is pretty much the max temperature you're gonna see gaming. 64 Celsius, or right around 65 and under is what you're gonna see on extended gaming periods with this GPU in this configuration. Again, I only have one exhaust case fan on this system, so even if we did see some rise in temperatures, there's still plenty of room to add more fans. But with this hardware configuration, I did not see a need to add more than that one exhaust fan on the case. It keeps noise low, it keeps dust to a minimum, so this is an excellent configuration for this hardware. We're gonna move on to a few benchmarks in games. So here we are in Elden Ring, and we're running full screen 1920 by 1080p. We don't have ray tracing on right now, but we have quality settings set to high, and we're gonna go see how this works. So here we're running about 50 FPS, and we have a pretty stable frame graph. The GPU is running at 66 Celsius, 99% usage, which is great. Our CPU looks really good. So this game is running quite well, very stable. Even when you're looking around very quickly, there's no hitching, no stuttering that you can see that's significant. It feels very smooth. So 1080p in Elden Ring, you're looking at about 50 to 60 FPS on high settings, and it's really looking great. To be honest, I'm very, very surprised at how well this is running. Let's try to bump it up to maximum and see what kind of drop we get from that. So maximum, we're seeing a little bit into the 40s, but you're still above that 30 FPS threshold. So if you're looking for the smoothest experience in Elden Ring with the A380, you're definitely going to be wanting to go to high settings just to get that extra stability and a little bit extra boost to your frames. Again, we're at 60 right now, dropping down to maybe 50s, not really seeing too many 40s with the settings on high. So this is a great little card for Elden Ring. So here we are in Baldur's Gate 3. We're running 1080p, triple buffering VSync. We're not running FSR right now, and we have overall preset of custom, but we have high settings across the board, ultra on the fog, and we have anisotropic times 16. and anti-aliasing of TAA, circular depth of field and quarter denoise. So we'll go and see how this runs. Now we're looking at roughly 38 frames per second. We have anywhere from a 20 to a 30 millisecond frame time, and this is actually running quite well. I mean, we are getting decent frames. It's not 60, but it's above 30, so we can have a smooth experience. The A380 is running Baldur's Gate pretty decently. I would have no issues playing this game like this. So let's check out what FSR does. We'll go with quality. We'll accept that. And now we're up to almost 50 frames per second. Quite a bit smoother. Now we're over 50 frames, almost hitting 60. So with FSR on quality, 1080p, you're looking at being able to play Baldur's Gate 3 with FSR on at roughly 50 to 60 depending frames per second. You could probably drop a few settings and get a solid 60. Or we can turn FSR to balanced, and we'll be able to run pretty stably around 50 frames per second, sometimes 60, it depends. This is very impressive in my opinion for a $100 GPU. Again, this is coupled with an AMD 7600 6-core CPU, so another budget buy right there. This whole computer is less than $1,000, and we are getting close to 60 FPS in Baldur's Gate 3 at 1080p. That to me is an incredible win. So here we are in probably the most graphically intensive game that is out currently, Cyberpunk 2077. And we have the system that already pre-selected settings, so we're just going to run a benchmark on that. But I noticed we have ray tracing on low, Intel Xe Super Sampling 1.2. We have that to auto, texture quality high. We have ray tracing to ray trace local shadows, medium crowd density. Decent settings here. Most of the settings are on high and ultra. So here we have 36 FPS. So this is actually doing really well. You can easily play Cyberpunk 2077 with this ARC A380, and it actually looks quite good. Has yet to drop below 30 frames per second. Here's a pretty intensive area due to the water here. Obviously we don't have any ray trace shadows through the water, but this is looking excellent. It's running really well. It's easily playable. Little glitching there, but otherwise it looks great. It's smooth and it's running great. I would say an average around 38 frames per second. We'll see what Cyberpunk says. Average 40. That is pretty good. We have a minimum of 35 and a max of 48, so not a ton of variance. So here we have the settings that we ran this on, and resolution of 1920 by 1080, Intel Xe Super Sampling, ray trace enabled with local shadows. This is actually great results. A380 with a Ryzen 5 7600. This is a $300 combo between the GPU and the CPU. We're running an average of 40 frames per second in Cyberpunk on high to ultra settings, 1080p with auto super sampling with Intel XeSS. This is excellent results. Way better, honestly, than I was expecting. I was expecting medium settings at 30 FPS, but to see these settings with high to ultra settings, we are running super sampling and resolution scaling, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to tell the difference, and to be getting 40 frames per second on a system that costs less than $1,000 is
an incredible value if you ask me.
I have a video on the parts list and price breakdown of this build, but it came in at just under $1,000. And coming in at under $1,000 and seeing at least 30 FPS on high settings at 1080p is an excellent situation to be in. So all in all, I am extremely impressed and happy with the performance of this PC. I think it being able to run the games that it did at the frame rates that it was capable is awesome. The GPU was about $100. That's really good value in my opinion for your money. I'll have a full parts list in the description if you want to check out some of the parts in this build. But otherwise, I think this was an awesome build to explore budget PC building. And if you can actually get into gaming for under $1,000 on a PC, and the answer is yes, you can. You can play modern games on a $1,000 PC with no problems. With that said, that's all the time that I have for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.